Hi, I'm Congressman Mike Quigley, founder of the Congressional Transparency Caucus. We're here at the Supreme Court with Gabe Roth from Fix the Courts, the group working from the outside to try to get cameras in the Supreme Court. There's so many important decisions the court's going to be deciding in the next coming months. Access to the courts, these proceedings is all so important for the American public. Jake, can you tell the audience here just why it means so much to transparency?
Yeah, absolutely. The Supreme Court hears some of the most important cases, tackles some of the most important issues that we face in America today. Who lives and dies, environmental regulations, who can vote, how our districts are drawn. This just today.
Who wins a presidential
election? Just today, a case about whether officers can arrest you at a party where you don't know the host. Kind of an interesting topic, but it reaches all sorts of different issues.
How our congressional maps are drawn.
Exactly. That was yesterday. So the idea that the American public, the taxpayers, can't see what goes on inside the courtroom unless you, camp out the night before to try to get a seat is kind of ridiculous. The justices...
How many seats are there?
So all told, there's about 250 or 300, but only about 50 of them are reserved for the public. The rest of them are for the Supreme Court bar, so those sort of like lawyers that sometimes work with the court, the clerks, other special guests. Arnold Schwarzenegger didn't have a trouble getting a seat when he was here yesterday. He was a special guest for the redistricting case. So the actual general public only gets about 50 seats out of 320 million of us who are clearly interested in a lot of what the court decides.
And let's talk about the barriers to this. I mean, obviously the other two branches of government are on TV all the time. What barriers are you facing trying to get this done?
Well, I think it's a lot of it. Partially, I think it's generational. I think the justices, a lot of them are of an older generation that just isn't used to being on TV, understanding what's on TV. And, the thing is, though, when just looking at other courts, because sometimes comparing cameras in courts versus cameras in Congress can be an apples to oranges comparison, because obviously members of the courts don't have to run. They have life tenure. Congressmen sometimes, you might have done this, use videos on C-SPAN to, for election purposes. Who knows? But more seriously, the thing is that with the other courts across the country, appellate arguments that are only an hour long, like they are in the Supreme Court, there haven't been any outbursts. There haven't been any issues. The only thing that's happened when you introduce cameras in the courtroom is that the public understands what goes on in that courtroom better. And I think that there's definitely a civil discourse and a civic understanding gap in the U.S. In order to close it, cameras in the court is a good solution.
The justices sometimes counter with the argument that, hey, you're going to get all our briefs, you're going to be able to read all this. How do you respond to that?
Well, people get, nowadays, we're doing a Facebook Live thing right now. The American public gets its information about its public officials through video. Video is the way that, whether it be on Facebook or Twitter or the local news. The local news is still watched by more Americans than any other source. More people get it from local broadcast than anything else. So I think the justices could very easily reach the public where they are, and where they are is in front of screens. So if you want to engage the public, that's the next step.
And for someone like yourself who's watched court proceedings for a long time, explain why it really matters to be able to watch the arguments in front of the court.
Sure. So sometimes there are really complicated issues that go before the justices, but sometimes which can be, you can look up, you can explain it afterwards. You can do C-SPAN can do a pop-up video thing like VH1. If someone says ERISA, they can quickly, pop up on the screen, explain what that is, for example. But specifically with the trying to understand with video, to sort of understand the give or the take, reading a transcript is incredibly dry. And to see the body language, to see how the lawyers react, to see how the justices react, you can learn a lot about a Supreme Court proceeding and what's going on and how it's going by being able to watch the video, see how the justices and the attorneys are relating to one another. And I think that's just something that conveys more information, and that's what we want from our public is more information.
And there's a historical qualities to this. And I used to teach at college, and I used to say I would love for my students to have been able to watch a recording of the arguments in Brown versus Board of Education.
You said that in congressional hearings that I've been to, so and I appreciate that.
The Gore case. These things matter. Looking back from a historical perspective helps people understand how those decisions were made.
And that's lost to history. We'll never be able to watch Thurgood Marshall argue before the Supreme Court. We'll never even be able to watch Paul Clement or Ted Olson argue before the Supreme Court. And these are individuals, John Roberts used to argue before the Supreme Court all the time. That's also lost to history. So yeah, the historical aspect is definitely something that we care a lot about as well.
And we won't be able to watch some justices not ask Gabe Roth from Fix the Courts, thanks so much for being with us today.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Let's make government more transparent. Thank you, everyone.